Hello, this is Math 0018, Section 2.3. Today we're looking at simplifying variable expressions. So we're going to look at simplifying variable expressions using multiplication. So we'll be looking at about I think three properties of multiplication today. So first of all, when you are simplifying variable expressions and you're using multiplication to do that, you have a few properties that you'll actually be using. The associative property of multiplication is one of those properties. This is just like the associative property of addition that we looked at in the last section, 2.2. Basically, it's the same thing, is that the order, oops, sorry about that. I need to get my pen. The order is the same and just the parentheses move. So if you look at this, you have A times B in parentheses times C equals A times B times C. So the order ABC is the same on both sides, but just the parentheses have shifted. So that's your associative property with multiplication. And you can look at these examples. 3 times 5 times 6 in parentheses is the same as 3 times 5 in parentheses times 6. Because on the first side, on the left side, you multiply 5 times 6 because it's in parentheses and get 30. 3 times 30 is 90. On the second side, we multiply 3 times 5 in the parentheses first, which is 15, times 6, which gives you 90. Same thing with variable terms. Okay, if we have 2 times 3x, we can move the parentheses and do 2 times 3 and get 6x. And that's basically what we're going to be doing. We're not going to write it out like that. We're just going to multiply the numbers, but you're technically using the associative property of multiplication when you're simplifying that type of expression. So here we have the commutative property of multiplication. And so there, what that tells you is that you can multiply in any order. The order does not matter. A times B is the same thing as B times A. So the order flips. That's how you can tell that you're dealing with the commutative property of multiplication. So 5 times negative 7 is the same thing as negative 7 times 5. You get negative 35 on both sides. Same thing with 5x times 3. You could also flip it and say 3 times 5x and then just multiply the numbers, 3 times 5, and you get 15x. Now we also have the multiplication property of 1, which basically says that if you have any number a and you multiply it by 1, you still get that same number or same term. Okay, so the product of any term and 1 is the same term. Again, you get the same thing. So 9 times 1 is still 9. 8x times 1 is still 8x. So anytime you multiply anything by 1, you get the same answer that you started with. And here we have the inverse property of multiplication. We also had an inverse property of addition. There it dealt with opposites. Here the inverse property of multiplication deals with reciprocals. So if you take any number a times its reciprocal 1 over a, you will always get 1. Okay, so that is where you're looking at basically the same thing as multiplying by the multiplicative inverse, which is a much longer name for reciprocal. So look at our examples here. 7 times 1 over 7, which is its reciprocal, is always going to give you 1. Or if you have 1/7 times 7, it also gives you 1. Same thing with variables. X times 1 over x equals 1, or 1 over x times x gives you 1. So anytime you multiply a term by its reciprocal, you always get 1. Alright, so here's some problems for us to simplify. Now, if you look at this, one thing to notice with the properties of multiplication, you do not have to have like terms, okay? So, you do not need like terms. You are just going to multiply the terms, the number parts together and attach the variable at the end. Okay, so negative 2 times 3x squared, we just multiply negative 2 times 3, That's negative 6, and we stick x squared on at the end, and that's it. So usually most people do much better at the multiplication part of this because you don't have to worry about adding or subtracting or like terms. You just multiply the numbers. Look at number 2. Negative 5 times negative 10x. Negative 5 times negative 10 is going to be a positive 50x. Okay? Now, number 3, we're going to keep this simple. We're just going to multiply. We've got fractions across the top and across the bottom. So we have negative 3/4 times 2/3 x. So on top, negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. And 4 times 3 would be 12 on the bottom. And we attach the x. Now, because the directions say simplify, we need to look at reducing that fraction. Negative 6 over 12 would reduce to negative 1/2 x by dividing the top and bottom by 6. That was the greatest common factor there. Okay? So negative 1/2 x is your answer there. Now the next one, even if it's decimals, you still just multiply the numbers. So number 4, we have negative 0.4 times 9. So first of all, a negative times a positive is a negative. Now if you have a hard time with decimals, and I have a hard time keeping the decimals straight in my head, we're multiplying 9 times 0.4. Well, 4 times 9 is 36, but you need a 1 decimal place. So it's going to end up being negative 3.6 x. So make sure you're careful about your decimals, and that you can double check it even if you use a calculator. Make sure you realize you should have 1 decimal place in your answer. Number 5, we have 14y times negative 4/7. So I'm going to put 14y over 1. First of all, a positive times a negative is going to be a negative. And now I'm just going to keep it simple, multiply across the top and across the bottom. So 14 times 4 is going to give me 56 over 1 times 7 is 7. And we still have the y out there at the end. Negative 56 over 7y. But I can simplify that fraction. Negative 56 divided by 7 is negative 8, and just attach the y. And the last one, 1/9 times 9b, once again put that 9b over 1. So I get on top 9, and actually you can put the b out to the side or right beside it, however you want to do it. And then on the bottom we have 9 and just the b out to the side. Well, 9 divided by 9 is just 1b, right? Or we could just write b all by itself. Let's make this look more like a 1. Okay, so either way, the simplest form is just b as your final answer there. Okay, now here's some for you to try, so pause the video and try these on your own. Number 1, 8x times negative 5. We just multiply the numbers and we get negative 40x. Now, number 2, we have decimals there. So remember, if we multiply 4 times 7, first of all, we know a negative times a positive is going to be a negative. 4 times 7 is 28, but you need 1 decimal point, 1 decimal place. So it's going to be 2.8y, negative 2.8y. Okay? Number 3, negative 2 times negative 7a. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive 14a. Just stick the variable at the end. All right, on the next couple of ones, we need to put these whole number parts over 1 for fractions. So I have a negative times a negative. I know that's going to be a positive. And if I multiply across the top, 1 times 8 is 8 over 8, which gives me 8 over 8y. Just bring the y there. And now 8 divided by 8 is 1y, or just y. That's the simplest. Okay? Number 5, we're going to put the negative 9b over 1. So I have 2/3 times negative 9b over 1. So a positive times a negative is a negative. 2 times 9 is 18. And 3 times 1 on the bottom is 3. B out there at the end. And now simplify. Negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6b. Just like that. And number 6, negative 5x times 0.3. So a negative times a positive is a negative. And if I multiply 3 times 5, I get 15. But I need that one decimal place, so it's going to give me negative 1.5. And don't forget that x. So you've got to be careful because you could have the number right and forget the x, and it's going to mark you totally wrong on your homework and quizzes. So be careful. So basically you multiply the numbers and attach the variable at the end. And that should be it for section 2.3.